To the end, really, of Jacob's life. And then we're going to evolve this into something new, but I want to take a minute and go through Genesis 32. So if you have your devices, your paper Bibles, whatever you have, go to Genesis 32, and we're going to start at about verse 22. One of the things that we said last was that Jacob decides that he's going to cross over the border of Canaan, and he's got these two companies of heavenly hosts, and it's all out of the sky, and the promise of God is reiterated, and all these great things. However, he is also greeted by a messenger from his beloved brother, Esau, saying, him and 400 guys are heading your way. And so this is where we kind of left this off, and I want to pick up in Genesis 32 after Jacob has this realization that this could be the end of him. This could be it. Esau has enough venom at this point, even though many years have passed in the story. The last time they were face to face, it was a terrible scenario in which Jacob had basically stolen from his brother the most precious birthright he could ever steal and relegated him essentially to being a servant to him. And so this is the first time they're going to encounter each other, and obviously there's a lot of apprehension on Jacob's part because he does not know how Esau is actually going to receive him and what's going to happen. 400 men, that's a war, that's a brawl, that's a fight. That has all the potential to be a game changer when you're coming across the border of Canaan and you have all of your family, your livestock, your possessions, and you're trying to carry them back. And now you know a mob is heading your way that's being led by a very angry older brother. So starting in verse 22 of Genesis 32, it says, and he, that's Jacob, arose that night and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, his 11 sons, and crossed over the ford of Jabbok. He took them, sent them over the brook, and sent over what he had. And then Jacob was left alone. I like to draw these ties, but I have to tell you, in times of apprehension, when you and I are unsure, and we don't know how we're going to be received. And let me tell you, I will say this much. In my particular life, I've actually had that scenario rise up several times throughout my ministry journey where I'm saying to myself, I'm not sure how I'm going to be received for a number of different reasons. Unsure. I was unsure how we would be received here in Idaho. Of course. We're strangers. You don't know. You don't know what's on the other side. You don't know how people are going to greet you. You don't know if people are going to be receptive to you. When we launch into the unfamiliar, the uncertain, there are a lot of question marks we put on that. And a lot of pressure seeps in, anxiety, things of that nature. When you launch into a new ministry focus, or you feel a call of God, or all of these things that are potentially frightening to our emotions, probably the greatest gift you can have is being alone for a moment. Being able to clear your mind, think to yourself, and look at yourself. Look at God. Have that encounter. I think there's a lot of static in our lives. We have preconceived notions about how things are going to go. We have our own perceptions of what we think people are thinking. We have a lot of stuff that comes into our head. And I've encountered that, and I'm sure you've encountered it too. Jacob right now knows what's happened in his own life, but he doesn't know what's happened in Esau's. He has no idea what growth might have happened in Esau. After all of these years, Esau might be quite comfortable and happy with the life that he has and may not feel that same level of anger. But how is Jacob to know that? And so as human beings, we tend to fill in the blanks when we're in what I call an information vacuum. And I think in being in information vacuums and trying to fill in blanks, we can sometimes create for ourselves our own level of angst that may not have to be there. And sometimes that anxiety can be quite crippling and leave us in a place where we don't we're kind of drowning in our own stuff. And I think that one of the most incredible moments really in Jacob's life and what is truly the game changer for him is this second when we see in verse 24 he's left alone. It says in verse 24, then Jacob was left alone and a man, capital M, you probably see in your version, wrestled with him until the breaking of day. Now when he saw that he did not prevail against him, that's not Jacob, capital H, when the man who is wrestling Jacob, that Jacob is wrestling, I should say, when he realizes he can't prevail against Jacob, he touched the socket of his hip, and the socket of Jacob's hip was out of joint as he wrestled with him. Please note what that says. Talk about tenacity. I want you to think about this. Jacob, his entire life, has always taken the sneaky route to get what he wants. He's never been face to face, if you really think about it. All of these major things that he's needed, all of these major moves, the birthright, etc., even everything that happened with Laban concerning the daughters and all of that. When you think about it, his entire life at this point has been washed over with a lot of, just like slithery snake-like moves. Of his own, of his family's, nothing's been through the front door. And he is left alone. And this man appears, and clearly this man is a man of some sort of heavenly power, some sort of divine power, because Jacob has no reason to choose one dude in the middle of the night to just wrestle with until the breaking of dawn. He sees that there is something about this man that must represent God. Something about this man is absolutely unique, and he wants so desperately to have a particular blessing on his life that he fights and fights. Now, I want you to think about this, because let's suppose this was not, let's say it was not a theophany. Do we all know what theophany means? Theo. What is that root word there? Theo. God. Phany is just the same as, I'm thinking like a physical presence. So it's a representation. When we talk about theophanies, it's ways in which God shows himself physically in some sort of manner so that he can be seen. The burning bush is an example of a theophany, if you will. If this is a theophany, or if this is an angel, there are scholars who divide themselves in both camps. Some will say that this is an actual presence of God. Others will say that this was an angel. I will tell you, whatever it was, Jacob, knowing that it would be the source, fights this thing. And I want you to think about it for a moment. Under what circumstances do you think that a human being would ever stand a chance against a physical representation of God or an angel? And yet, this presence, whatever it may be, entertains the notion of Jacob fighting this out of his soul enough that it doesn't prevail over him. Surely, a manifestation of God or an angel would have more strength than a human. With a single pinky, he should be able to just knock him right down to the dirt. But the wording of this is powerful, because this is the first time in Jacob's life, without hoodwinking anyone, he's truly working for what he's about to receive. This is the first time. And here's what it says as it continues on. It says, now when this thing saw that he didn't prevail against him, he touched the socket of his hip, and the socket of Jacob's hip was out of joint as he wrestled with him, and he said, let me go, the day breaks. This means that Jacob, with a hip out of joint, has anybody ever had a hip actually knocked out of the socket? I don't even want to imagine what pain that is. I've heard a shoulder knocked out of the socket is enough pain. Now a major bone, like your thigh bone being knocked out of the joint, imagine the pain, and he still won't let him go. Jacob still will not stop fighting. To the point that this appearance, this physical manifestation of either God or angel says, let me go. Think about a faith level that is so powerful that you are willing to fight until God or his heavenly hosts are like, can you please stop? Let me go. You're not stopping. I've knocked your hip out of joint and you won't stop. That's how desperately Jacob needed something. But he said, part B of verse 26, I will not let you go unless you bless me. Have you ever wanted a blessing so bad? This is bad. This is a desire that really, I don't know if I've ever desired a blessing to this point where God would send me an actual thing to fight it out of my system and actually work for it. But he says, so he said to him, what is your name? Verse 27. And he said, Jacob. You know, the last time that Jacob really was faced with a question about his identity, he didn't answer truthfully. Last time he was faced with a question of his identity, he said he was Esau. And that's how he got his blessing. He got his blessing by lying about his identity. And now he's standing probably in the presence of God, at the very least heavenly host. He's standing in the presence of an angel or God, and he's asked the question again, who are you? You who are seeking a blessing, you who wants the best stuff, you who's fighting so hard, who are you? And the answer is Jacob. Supplanter, trickster. That's who I am. And this reality is what allows the blessing to flow. And can I tell you something? To draw a line for ourselves, I believe that there is nothing God wants more than our complete raw honesty in his presence about who we are. And I believe when you and I are facing God in the reality of our prayer times, in the reality of times in which he wants to talk to us, in our times of confusion, in our times of turmoil, in our times of victory and joy, I think there is something really raw about being honest about who we are, what our identity is, and what we are known for. Jacob just named himself as exactly what he is. I'm the trickster, and I always have been. That's who I am. From birth. From grabbing Esau's heel straight out of the womb trying to beat him. Trying to beat him out. He says, I'm Jacob. And that's when God has the opportunity to say, your name shall no longer, in verse 28, be called Jacob, but Israel. For you have struggled with God and with men and have prevailed. Let me say that a little differently, because there's something about this verse that in the book of Genesis has always sat there and really drilled a hole in my head. And I've stared at this verse 1,000 times. I've taught on this 1,000 times. And I'm always in awe that when God gives this person a name change, he literally says to him, you fought God and you won. That's the brass tacks of what that name means. You fought God, you fought people, and you won. I can't imagine a fortitude, a strength, a grit to such a dimension that a human being would be declared as being the winner over God. And yet God gave him this name. He gave him this name because he deserved it. Because that's how hard he fought. I will say that I think sometimes in my own life when I look at Jacob, and there's a lot to not like about Jacob, actually. I wouldn't call him a favorite of mine in Scripture at all. To be honest, he's sort of at the bottom of a list of people that I like in Scripture. It's sort of like, throw Jacob down there with Cain, Judas, and a few others. Like, I've never been a Jacob fan. I am not Team Jacob. I'm not. I never have been. I've always been put off by the way that he treated his father in the end. I've always been put off by all of the tomfoolery surrounding his life. I've never been a Jacob fan. But I will tell you something. I could not lie to God or anybody else and say that I have in my life ever demonstrated such a strength that I think God has ever looked at me and said, you fought me and you won. You won, kid. You're the one. I've not done that. And I don't know if anybody else in here can say that they've done it. I'm not sure. Maybe you have. But this is kind of incredible. He won his name change. And it says, right after that in verse 29, then Jacob asked, saying, tell me your name, I pray. And he said, why is it that you ask about my name? And he blessed him there. It's interesting. I've heard some pretty stunning sermons about this part. And this is actually where some scholars truly believe that this may have been a theophany. So I want to at least open that avenue up to you, because there's a split in how people look at this. A lot of people believe that this was an angel of God that was sent simply to bless Jacob. And you know what? If that is the case, it does not actually say it's an angel. It describes it as a man. And you will see that a lot of the words that are chosen in the English version do capitalize as if to denote divinity. I will tell you that some of where that comes from is this exchange here, because at the point in which the question of tell me your name is put out there, and the response back is, why are you asking my name? Why do you need that information? And then blesses him. On top of it, there's a lot of Jewish theory about it that says that the reason why this individual did not answer that question is because in Jewish feeling and Jewish doctrine, the name of God is so sacred it can't really be spoken. And the revealed name of God that's going to happen later in Scripture through Jesus or Joshua or Yeshua is something that has not been put into place at all yet. So there are some scholars who read into this and say, by Jewish standards, of course, I'm reading backwards a little bit, because remember, we are just now beginning to form what will be the children of Israel. So the law has not been given, the official formation of Israel as a nation, none of these things have happened yet. But Jewish rabbinical theory is that the reason why this individual doesn't answer the question is because it is God himself, his name is too sacred, and his revealed name has not been given to what will be the nation of Israel yet. Very interesting. It also is rooted in verse 30. Take a look at verse 30. So Jacob called the name of the place Peniel. Why? For I have seen who? God face to face, and my life is preserved. Now there are some who would say, and I've read some of these theories, some will say, he says God because he didn't have anything else to draw from and probably didn't realize it was an angel. The only thing I will say is that Jacob has seen angels already. He has seen them. He has seen actual physical manifestations of angels and probably wouldn't confuse the two. Something about this man stood different to him, enough for him to call him God. If God himself did, and I am one who is in the camp of believing that this was an actual theophany, a manifestation of God. I always have been. But if in fact that's what this is, it only makes this entire story more powerful. That he wrestled God himself. God let him win. And God gave him a name change that basically said, you fought everyone including me, and you're the winner. I can say whatever I want about Jacob not being my favorite. What I can't ever say is that Jacob was not blessed of God. Yes, he was. He was blessed of God in a real and radical way. So when you get to chapter 37, you're going to see that en route to Hebron in order to visit Isaac, a very sad chapter of Jacob's life unfolds. His wife, Rachel, dies while she's giving birth to her second son, Benjamin. Jacob ends up having two sons from Rachel. That is the next character that we're really going to get in on. Because Joseph has an extraordinary life. There's a chance that it may take us a couple of turns to get through Joseph's life. I think it's important for us to take our time because there are some things about Joseph that are incredible, and there's a lot of meat on the bone for us as Christians as well. But I want to focus in on Joseph a little bit. Let me just say that remember how I said playing favorites is a dangerous game? No one learns anything in this family. Nobody learns anything. Just to put a little footnote, because I realized I didn't do that in focusing on the encounter with the angel, at the conclusion of that, he does meet Esau. His story continues, so you can gather that Esau didn't chop his head off. They actually fell on each other in sorrow and apology and restoration and all those amazing things, and were able to go their separate ways. But nonetheless, we have this situation in which Jacob loses his wife. He loses her as she's giving birth to Benjamin. The two children that she was able to give him, Joseph and Benjamin, are special in their own ways, but Joseph rises above everybody else. Now, we know that favoritism is what started the feud between Jacob and Esau. Their parents had their favorites. And now Jacob has his own favorite, Joseph. And I'm sure a lot of those warm fuzzies are associated with the fact that Joseph is the product of the woman he really loved, right? He loved Rachel, worked hard for Laban in order to get Rachel, okay? After having to deal with her sister, poor Leah. There's that one that I always say has my heart, poor girl. But nonetheless, he decides that he's going to make a big show, really, of how much Joseph is the favorite by making him a Technicolor Dreamcoat. No, if anybody knows the reference. But, he makes him this amazing coat that clearly shows the favoritism of his father, and his coat of many colors is donned. And, Joseph was not wise. He really wasn't. He really wasn't, and we all know this. We're familiar with this story enough, but let me just throw the Christian principle in here, okay? When God is speaking to you, when he's telling you the great mysteries of your life, okay? When he's giving you dreams and visions before your Cheerios and all that good stuff, do yourself a favor. Sit on that a bit. Don't go flapping your gums, because the thing about Joseph is Joseph didn't have wisdom. He had a lot of zeal, and he definitely had a sensitivity, right? He had a prophetical gift, if you will, in that God is allowing him to see these dreams, and all throughout his life he's going to be able to be instrumental in interpreting dreams. It's his thing. It's his spiritual sensitivity. Everybody's got one. Each one of us in this room has something that you're probably more sensitive to than others. I know for myself, like when you're talking the gifts of the Spirit, for example, to just bring it into the Christian realm for a second, the one I've been used in the least, and I mean the absolute least, I can count on one hand, not using all fingers, is tongues and interpretation. It's the one that's at the absolute bottom for me. It's not the one that I've been used in the most. Does that mean I don't have access to that by having the Spirit of God? Sure, I have access to it. It's just not a sensitivity necessarily that I lean towards. I've been used in other ways instead. Joseph has this gifting, and you know what? Every person in this room probably has something in the realm of God, in the supernatural, in your own faith journey that you have a proclivity towards. You're more in tune with this area. I'm not going to be the worship leader du jour, but you'll be worship leader du jour. You'll have a sensitivity to that. You'll know how to guide people. It's each one of us. You'll know. Please, I've lost all of the patience for what to even do with children. Okay, so there was a time maybe, but not anymore. But you'll be very in tune with their needs, their wants, what brings them joy and what doesn't. You will know that. Everybody has their radio station they're tuned into. And there are different seasons in our lives where it goes back to static and something else comes through sharp. And you have to be able to move with that, but be careful. Just because it's coming in sharp for you, just because you hear it, doesn't mean that the people around you necessarily hear it like you do, and it doesn't necessarily mean they will understand it even if you try to explain it. I have been bitten by that. For a long time, the biggest way that God spoke to me was through dreams. Lay my head on the pillow at night, critical moments in our ministry, and I would have a dream and wake up I mean, from dead sleep to sitting straight up knowing I've heard from God. And I'd write that thing down. And I'd watch those things come to pass later on. There were times in which I spoke them to people I shouldn't have. And I learned my lesson afterwards. And there were other times I should have said something and I didn't. And I've lived to regret on both ends. Now Joseph, he's experiencing dreams in which his brothers are bowing to him. That's a big thing when you're the favorite to go saying. Again, he's young and really naive, unwise. So he goes flapping his gums, telling them, hey, I had this dream where you guys are bowing to me. And they're sort of like, great, awesome favorite child with your fancy coat. But it earned nothing but resentment and bitterness. Yes? Yeah. Absolutely. Way down the line, like so far down the line that you should be grateful if like your birthright blessing is to tie our shoelaces. Yes. So he has no right. This is the thing. He just didn't have wisdom. And that's the caution for us. We want to make sure that when we're talking, especially about, it would have been better for him to go to his dad. It actually would have been better to go to his father if he wanted to have a sounding board to bounce that off of. But to lord it over them, that's what it looks like to them. And that's what causes him all kinds of trouble. And so, Joseph's approaching a field where his brothers are keeping their flocks, and they conspired to kill him. That's kind of radical. I don't know. Hey, there are some days I'm glad I'm an only child, all right? I'm really glad because I see all the murderous intentions between siblings, and I'm sort of like, I got to live, you know, but here they are, and they're just in that place where they go straight for the kill. But Judah intervenes. Thank God for Judah. Does anybody know what's prophetically important about Judah? Judah, the tribe of Judah. Anybody know? Judah. The lion from the tribe of Judah is... We only worship him like all the time. Jesus. So Judah is the messianic line. Yes. So Jesus is going to come through the tribe of Judah. And Judah's the one who comes forward and is like, wait, hold on. I know you guys want to jump in and like murder him and spill his guts everywhere, but maybe we just like convince you to do a little something different. Like we'll still get rid of him, but maybe not this dramatically. And so they come up with this idea of convincing that they should go ahead and sell him to a caravan of Ishmaelites for about 20 pieces of silver. By the way, less than the price of a slave. Okay, so they didn't even get anything out of it. And Joseph's coat is dipped in animal blood and shown to their father. And Israel, once again, Jacob, is deceived. It says in Galatians 6:7, whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. And can I just say, in Jacob's life, Israel's life, he has dealt with so much deception, it's not even funny. This one to me is cruel. As much as I've never been a Jacob fan, this was not right. And yet, it is not very different from what he did to his own dad in fooling his father and stealing a birthright. Now his own sons fool him out of thinking his favorite is alive and leave him in complete despair. So, he's sold. The Ishmaelites, and you can find this in Genesis 37 if you look between verses 12 and about 36. The Ishmaelites sold him to the house of Potiphar, and Joseph refuses the advances of Potiphar's wife while he's there, proving to be a fantastic servant, best slave ever. And Potiphar's wife, unfortunately, reports him as having tried to take advantage of her, and her husband has him thrown in prison. Let me draw a little tie here. This is the little tie I want to draw here. Here's our little Christian line. There are times within the church that somebody's going to come to you and they're going to tell you tall tales about someone else. There is no reason, aside from a certain measure of political pressure, why Potiphar should have ever believed that Joseph lacked integrity enough to do this to his wife. He should have known his own wife. And can I tell you, the individuals who come to you that are flapping their gums about someone else, please don't act on what you hear against the character of an established servant in God's house. So if you are hearing about pastor, okay, see, right? No telling. Okay, but if somebody comes along and they're like, can I tell you what I saw the pastor doing? And do yourself a favor, do a character check. Check that source in your own head. What do I know of this person? Is this a credible source? Are there witnesses? What is the point of telling me? I think as Christians, sometimes we actually need to ask people, what are you trying to gain from this by telling me? Do you know how many times I've had individuals, this is why I don't make this promise anymore. You know how Jesus says, let your yes be your yes and your no, don't swear by anything? I have had people who from the beginning of the conversation are like, there's something I have to tell you, but you have to promise. You have to swear not to tell anybody. For me, I hear a million red alarms in my head because I'm automatically saying, I'm going to guess no good is going to come from this one. No good's going to come from this one if I entertain it. And I have gotten to the place in my life where it's like, you know what? I don't even need to be in the know if those are the terms. And I've told people before, I don't know that I can necessarily guarantee that, depending on what you say. But if you want to get it off of your chest and you want to talk to somebody, you can talk to me about what's up with you, like what's going on with you. But I'm going to tell you something. Be very wary, because character assassination does happen in the church. And a lot of people will hide it under the guise of prayer. Do you know how many times, hey, there's something I want to tell you, just, to be in prayer about it. But, and it's like, bleh. And I'm hearing what Sister so-and-so did with this one and that one, and all of this stuff is coming out, and you're saying to yourself, what is the point of this adventure right now? What are we doing here? What are we doing here? Aside from maligning other people, be careful. Know the character of the speaker. Know the character of the one being spoken about. Know the people that you serve with, and be careful. In this particular case, Joseph's life is changed because one woman flaps her gums about something that is absolutely untrue, and the people around him take action. Beware not to take action and ostracize off of gossip. Beware. It's a killer. 11 years. 11 years in prison. I want you to think about that. 11 years for something he didn't do. I would get pretty resentful. I'd be resentful after day 1, minute 1, second 1. I would be so angry being stuck in a situation where I felt like I was wronged because I didn't do what I was allegedly accused of. But 11 years, and these divine promises of Joseph's dreams of greatness and people bowing to him and him being in a position of authority, they seem so remote at that point. He won the confidence of the jailer. He won the confidence of his fellow prisoners. He interpreted their dreams, and eventually his release came through this ability, basically. When Pharaoh, Genesis 41, we are swiftly getting through the book of Genesis, let me just tell you. By the time we get to Genesis 41, Pharaoh has a dream no one can interpret, and a former prisoner who was with Joseph at the time and had an accurate dream interpretation from him makes a recommendation, says, go ahead and get him. The dream is revealed, and Joseph has the interpretation from God. He says, yeah, I know exactly what this is saying. This is saying 7 years of plenty in Egypt and 7 years of famine. We're about to head into some trouble. And Pharaoh, he turns around and he says, okay, all right, if that's the case, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to put you in charge. I'm going to get you out of this prison. I'm going to get you robed up right, cleaned up. I'm going to put you in a position in which you are the one who is going to take advantage of the 7 years of plenty and make sure this country and its surrounding provinces are able to last. That's your job. That's your directive. And Joseph comes out, and that's exactly what he does. And when the famine becomes severe, what ends up happening? His brothers come a-wandering in. And they don't recognize him. Well, they wouldn't recognize him for a number of reasons. He's in the vestments of the Egyptians. That's not going to be familiar. Time has passed. He's an older man. A lot has changed. But can I just tell you something? And this will be our final line. We'll talk about the restoration of the family next week. But here's the final line I just want to draw through. That you are going to find in your life people who were so sure they knew you when suddenly don't recognize you nearly as much because of the evolution of your character, the changes that have happened as a result of God being in your life. God has purpose for each one of us, and there's ministry for each one of us. There's a journey for each one of us, and as we're going on that journey, things about us morph. Listen, I started this journey when I was 14. I just found, I'll have to show it to 412, I just found my baptism picture when I was 14. It's on my phone now. Me at 14, oh my God. But, Josie at 14 is not Josie at 39. No way. 25 years of change. And you at 14 is not the same, even in less time of change. Each one of us has evolved. And sometimes there are going to be people who have not been an intimate part of that journey and try to do callbacks to earlier times and try to put you through the filter of what you once were. You were the partier, you were the this, you were the goth, you were the whatever it was, you were the addict, they know you from a period of time and they've frozen you in place like a painting that's never changed on the wall. And they are going to have that reckoning in that moment in which they see what God has done through you. Make sure that you do not fall back into old dimensions because someone else is perceiving you as such. Be very careful about that. So when people you used to hang with and roll with that knew you based on certain habits and lifestyles come waltzing back into your life and they try to pick up where you all once left off, don't forget you've changed. You are not that person anymore. They're stuck, but you have moved on, and you owe it to God and all that he's done in building and rebuilding and reshaping and repairing you to not fall back into the old definition of self. Joseph was once a flap his gums kind of individual who unwisely and through naivete was causing people around him to feel bitterness and resentment and feel as if his job was to put them at the bottom of the heap. But then a time comes in which he's actually given power so that he can take them and elevate them and raise them up. Yeah, sure, by issue of authority. Are they bowing to him? Sure. His prophecy comes true. But do you think he gave one rip about the bowing? No. The bowing seemed so important when he was this little nitwit in his father's house with a fancy coat. But now the only thing he can think of is, who are they? What have they become? Are they suffering? Show me my younger brother. Show me what's changed. Anything to have relationship. Let me feed them. Let me make sure they're okay. How's your father? My father. Things change with time. Of course. Yeah. Uh-huh. That's right. That's right. It's funny that you say that because I will say something. When I first came to the church, there were a lot of things about me that were an unholy mess. Just an unholy mess. And I know that. looking back at it, I'm sort of like, oh, wow, yeah, I was a bull in a china shop, spiritually speaking, right? I knew that. And I remember that I encountered my first pastors years later on 3 different occasions. And one of the occasions was kind of critical mass for me because we were around a lot of people that I had influence over, and I wasn't sure what they were going to say when they reminisced. Because there I am, and I'm thinking, they knew me way before I was teaching. They knew me when I had a lot of questions and a lot of mistakes were made and a lot of things like that. And there was this one encounter where I am introducing them to people that I had influence over, and I wasn't sure when they said, we got a story to share with you. And when I heard that, I will tell you something, I caved on the inside because I wasn't sure what was coming next and whether it was going to embarrass me about what I was when. And in fact, this pleasantly surprised me because one of them said, we got a story to tell you. When she was your age, do you know what she did? And I thought, which thing? Here it comes, exactly. I literally was like, oh no, I'm going to have to do cleanup aisle 3 big time. No, she said, she would sit on the front pew, and she said, I'd watch her from the sidelines, and she said her eyes were huge. She was absorbing everything. And when the pastor was preaching, I don't know that she ever blinked. She watched him go from one side to the other, and she said she never was distracted by anything around her. She didn't even sit with her fellow kids because she didn't want anybody chattering at her. They were all off in their own corner as a youth group, and they were chit-chatting, but she was on the front row sitting by herself just listening and really gaining everything that she possibly could. And I remember I thought to myself, oh, of all the stories you could have told, thank God for that one, because I could think about a million more that would have been less than favorable. So you're absolutely right. We have to make sure we don't take that position of embarrassing people either. It's sometimes in our desire to have fun, because we all want to have fun, right? We all want to have fun, poke fun, laugh. We love and crave laughter. We love and crave levity and all those things, but sometimes that does come at a price for another person. And when we do that, we can sour things for other people and wreck relationships they might be fostering from a position of greater strength. And when we plunge them back into older days, if the other person is not receptive and really human about it, they could end up losing respect and calling into question or creating a discomfort and a reminiscing that may not be ultimately good. So, yeah, we'll stop there for now. We'll pick it up in Genesis chapter 45 next week as we talk about the encounter with the brothers, the murderous brothers. Does anybody have any questions or comments? You guys good? Everybody all right? Huh? Wah? Wah? Who would like to pray?